In the opening sequence of this animated feature, Peter Parker reveals himself to be Spider-Man, aka the friendly neighborhood web slinger. Everyone is aware of his fame at this point, what with his many rescues of New York and the success of his comic books, breakfast cereal, and holiday music. Although he is not entirely pleased with himself, his emo dance, for example, he takes his role as Spider-Man very seriously. We meet Miles Morales, a youngster from Brooklyn, just as he enrolls in a prestigious private school. Both his father Jefferson and his mother Rio are still actively involved in his life. Miles visits the homes of his pals and decorates the street signs with homemade stickers. When police officer Jefferson finally catches up with Miles, he drives him to school in the police car. On the way to school, they catch a news segment about Spider-Man, a character that Jeff does not like. Jeff declares his love for Miles upon their arrival, but Miles doesn't reciprocate. After Miles responds awkwardly, Jeff uses his radio to make him say, "I love you," again in front of the whole school. As he tries to settle into his new home, Miles immerses himself in his education. He meets Gwen Stacy in one of his seminars, but she doesn't reveal her identity right away. A little later, Miles slips out of his dorm to pay a visit to his uncle Aaron, Jefferson's brother and a bit of an outcast due to his illegal activities. After Miles fills him in on Gwen, Aaron advises him to use a shoulder touch to win her over. Since Aaron appreciates Miles's artwork, the two decide to do some graffiti in the tunnels near the metro. Once Miles has finished spray painting the walls, he snaps a picture of his work and a radioactive glitching spider climbs up his thigh and bites his hand, but instead of swatting the spider away, he simply taps his hand softly and leaves with Aaron. Miles' emotions have shifted the following day. His clothes are too small, and he's sweating tremendously. He also hears a voice in his brain, which is accompanied with text boxes in the style of comic books. When he properly introduces himself to Gwen, she tries to give him a false name. After Miles's hand gets entangled in Gwen's shoulder and hair while attempting the shoulder touch, they had to visit the nurse and have her shave Gwen's head. Miles is reprimanded by a security guard for leaving the hostel when the guard discovers him on his way back to his room. Miles starts panicking out and running and hiding in the man's office, where he manages to get everything stuck to him. Incredulous with his newfound talents, he climbs out the window and begins to walk on the walls before bursting into the streets below. As time passes, Miles returns to the tunnel where he was bitten by the spider. As he looks at it more closely, it glitches again. As a result, Miles goes into hiding not long afterward when his spider sense goes off. Spider-Man swings in, hot on the heels of the Green Goblin's pursuit. Fisk Industries, where Wilson Fisk, Kingpin, is trying to power up a super collider, is where the action takes place. Spidey stops what he's doing to remove Miles from the path of the Goblin's attacks. Spidey finds out that Miles is similar to him just when the contraption begins working. Some buildings in the cities outside have begun to change shape in mysterious ways. The tunnel is blown to pieces. When Miles tries to help Spidey, the injured superhero advises him to hide before giving him a drive to deactivate the collider. The Kingpin, the Goblin, and their colleague the Prowler surround Spider-Man as he takes off his mask. After pleading with Kingpin not to restart the collider and urging him to consider his loved ones, Kingpin becomes enraged and kills Spider-Man by slamming his fists down on him while Miles watches in terror. He flees back to his house, where his parents catch him, and then to Jefferson, whom he hugs. The death of Spider-Man, whose real identity was Peter Parker, makes headlines around the world. All around the city, New Yorkers are heartbroken. Before attending Peter's memorial ceremony, Miles shops for a costume. The store owner has the voice of Stan Lee, no less, and many of the mourners also dress like the wall crawler. Mary Jane gives a moving eulogy for her husband, while Aunt May looks on gravely from the back. After hearing MJ's words, Miles is motivated to finally become Spider-Man. He's curious about his abilities but isn't sure how to activate them. His subsequent visit to Peter's gravesite is interrupted by the appearance of another man, Peter B. Parker. Peter reveals that he has been Spider-Man for a long time and is an adult in his world, but that he has lost his Aunt May and is no longer married to Mary Jane because of his inability to resolve his difficulties as Spidey and his refusal to have children when she does. Depressed and overweight, he was sucked into this world when the collider was activated. Now that he's found Miles, he's knocked out, and Miles tries to swing away with him as the cops chase them, but they finish up colliding with pedestrians and collapsing to the ground. For Peter's own protection, Miles takes him away. When Peter explains that he came from another dimension, he asks him how it is that he is still alive. Miles pulls out the drive, which Peter from Miles's universe calls a goober, that Peter from his universe gave him, but it doesn't work. Being in this dimension causes Peter to glitch and be unstable, so he breaks free and takes the broken goober to try to get a new one so he can return home. But before Peter can go out on his own, Miles guilts him into joining so that the two of them can put things right. Miles and Peter don their disguises and head to Alchemax Labs, where the collider data is being stored. Kingpin and his top scientist, Tombstone, Marvin Crondon Jones III, are trying to figure out how to break in. Kingpin's goal in running the collider is to find his way back to his family, Vanessa and Richard. Having witnessed his attempt to assassinate Spider-Man many years prior, they had escaped from him, only to be fatally struck by a truck as they ran away. After sneaking into the lab, Miles and Peter locate the computer room. Just as Kingpin and his scientist have left the building, Miles begins to panic once more since he can't get himself unstuck from the ceiling. When Miles is really frightened, he discovers another hidden talent of his, invisibility. The scientist then walks in, and Peter has no choice but to try to win her over with his charms. She's thrilled to see Spider-Man is still alive, but only so she can finally get rid of him. She then introduces herself as Dr. Olivia Octavius, or DOCOCK, as her full name. As she attacks Peter, her mechanical tentacles extend, but Miles quickly seizes the computer and the two escape. The scientists run them out of the lab and into the forest. As the bad men close in, the guys web swing into the woods, but Doc Ock is webbed up by a third spider person, Gwen. She explains to Miles and Peter that she, too, was bitten by a spider in another world and sent here. She rescued her dad from certain death but was unable to save Peter. The trio then makes its way out of the forest. Later, Doc Ock reports back to Kingpin, who is extremely perturbed to learn of the presence of not one, but two Spider-Men. After figuring out that the Peter in front of her is from another dimension, Aunt May invites Miles, Peter, and Gwen over for dinner. She shows them Peter's former secret lair, which is packed with weapons, armor, and vehicles. There, they meet Spider-Ham, a spider bitten by a radioactive pig, Penny Parker and her robot SPDR, and Spider-Man Noir, a black and white, old gangster talking hero. They were all sucked out of their respective dimensions and into Miles's universe. A group of them have decided to stay behind and use a new goober to shut down the collider so that the rest of them can return home, but Miles insists that he must do it because this is his dimension. Peter tries to reassure them by mentioning Miles's cool powers, but Miles is unable to activate them and demonstrate his ability to aid the group. Dejected, Miles disappears and walks out of the cave. After not hearing from Miles in some time, Jefferson and Rio decide to reach out to Aaron for aid, and Miles shows up to Aaron's house at that moment. When Miles visits Aaron's abandoned apartment, he runs across Prowler, who forces him to disappear once more. Prowler has a conversation with Kingpin and then takes off his disguise to expose his true identity as Aaron. The thought of it terrifies Miles. He makes an attempt to flee the flat, but Aaron follows him all around the city until he finally loses him. After learning that his uncle is working for Kingpin, Miles returns to Aunt May's house to give the other spider people the news. Miles has unfortunately guided Prowler, Doc Ock, Goblin, Tombstone, and Scorpion to this location. When the bad guys come knocking, the spider people answer the call. Aunt May, too, joins in the fun by protecting the family mansion. When Prowler spots Miles, he gives chase, all the way up to the roof. After Kingpin instructs Prowler to kill Miles, the latter removes his disguise to see his uncle. After nearly killing his nephew, Aaron feels shame and guilt. Kingpin shoots Aaron in the back as he retreats and then tries to grab Miles, but the young man and his uncle make a clean getaway. In an alley where he is on his deathbed, he brings Aaron. Miles feels responsible for what happened, but Aaron tells him to move on. When Jefferson discovers Miles standing over Aaron's body, he chases him away. After seeing his brother, Jeff completely loses it. After Miles meets up with the other spider people, he heads back to his room. His roommate faints after seeing one of them climb the wall. When Peter sees that Miles is in danger, he webs him to his chair and takes the dummy to the Collider's control room. When they depart, Jeff approaches Miles's dorm room from the outside, but Miles is unable to talk to him because he is connected to the internet. Jeff shares the news about Aaron and expresses his hope that Miles is doing fine. Then, Miles gathers his courage and uses his power to break away. Back at Aunt May's, Miles retrieves the classic Spider-Man costume and modifies it with some dark spray paint. He gains confidence in his abilities and begins to swing around the city. One more spider. Due to the workers donning Spidey masks, the public is able to gain entry to Kingpin's gala. Even though she has no idea who he is or what he's talking about, Peter sees MJ and tries to express his regret about leaving her. They head toward the area containing the Collider, but Kingpin's goons catch up with them and launch an assault. Miles swoops in to help his allies fight back. Another earthquake shakes the city as the Collider is turned on and space and time begin to collide. Spider-Man during this battle, Moore faces off against Tombstone, Penny, and SPDR take on Goblin, and Spider-Ham uses a cartoon mallet to dispatch of Scorpion. While Miles is occupied with trying to turn off the Collider, Doc Ock attacks Gwen and Peter. The goons are dispatched, and Doc Ock gets run over by a truck from another realm. Unfortunately, SPDR has sustained significant damage, leaving Penny devastated despite Noir and Spider-Best Ham's efforts to console her. As they were ready to make the return jump, she retrieves the spider. After saying their goodbyes, Penny leaves first, followed by Noir and Spider-Ham. Before heading home, Gwen reassures Miles of their relationship. Even though Peter wanted to stay behind and aid Peter, Miles sent him back so that he could take care of business in his own realm. Then, Miles goes after the Collider, but Kingpin responds with heavy attacks. As the boundaries between their worlds blur, he begins to perceive a different Vanessa and Richard. As Kingpin is about to completely overwhelm Miles, Jefferson walks in view. After getting to his feet, Miles uses his superpower to blast Kingpin away and then webs him up toward the button to turn off the Collider. Miles is safe and well and contacts Jeff to let him know it. Next, he goes over to his father while still in Spider-Man costume and gives him a hug to reassure him that he's doing a fine job as his son's protector. Eventually, Jeff comes across a webbed-up and arrest-ready Kingpin. Miles is juggling his newfound fame as the city's new Spider-Man with his regular high school responsibilities. Meanwhile, in Peter's timeline, he's on his way to make up with MJ. Miles shuts his bedroom door for a snooze and is startled to hear Gwen's voice calling from another world. Stan Lee and Steve Ditko are honored in a dedication. Before the credits roll out, Miguel O'Hara/Spider-Man 2099 meets his assistant Lila, who tells him about the other Spider people. When he arrives on Earth 67, he has a peculiar pointing debate with the Spider-Man from the 1960s cartoon. Thanks for watching and don't forget to subscribe for other recaps.